Welcome to the world of Sci-Fi Stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. The warship no one noticed, until it crushed an empire. The freighter Wayfarer's Luck drifted through the vast emptiness of space, its hull battered from years of wear and tear. To any passing ship it was nothing more than a rusted relic, an old cargo hauler barely worth the fuel it burned. No one suspected that buried beneath its rusted plating and flickering navigation lights lay the deadliest warship humanity had ever built. Captain Elias Vance lounged in his command chair, feet propped up on the console. His uniform was worn, and his stubbled face wore the casual exhaustion of a man who had spent too long in deep space. His crew was a ragtag bunch: engineers, smugglers, EX soldiers, each of them hand-picked not for their spotless records, but for their ability to get the job done. And right now their job was to get close to this empire without raising any alarms. This had been humanity's nightmare for decades. When they arrived in force, they hadn't come with diplomats or trade agreements. They came with warships the size of cities, plasma cannons that could tear through entire planets, and a singular message: submit or be erased. Earth had fought back and lost. The remnants of humanity had scattered to the stars, hiding in the cracks of the universe like vermin. The galactic community had watched and done nothing, unwilling to challenge this. Now the empire was bloated and arrogant, believing humanity had been crushed completely. They had no idea what was coming. 2 patrol ships, 15 clicks out, said Delara, their sensor techer, sharp green eyes scanning the outdated console. They aren't paying attention. Elias smirked. Why would they? We look like junk. That was the entire point. The Wayfarer's Luck had been deliberately aged, stripped of anything that might suggest it was more than an old cargo hauler. Underneath, though, was a different story. Layered beneath the rusted hull was reinforced plating, next-gen cloaking systems, and weaponry that could reduce an armada to dust. This was no freighter, this was retribution. Maintain course, Elias said. Leighton, get inside their defenses before we make our move. The crew nodded. They had spent years planning this moment, piecing together scraps of old wartech, stealing blueprints, and working in the shadows while humanity licked its wounds. They weren't here to win a battle, they were here to start a war. As the ship glided closer to space, Elias allowed himself a small smile. They would never see it coming. The Wayfarer's Luck moved at a steady, unhurried pace toward the checkpoint station, orbiting this border world of Keeler 7. It was one of many such outposts, a routine security measure for the Empire, manned by crews who had grown complacent with humanity's supposed defeat. Elias Vance watched from his command chair as the patrol ships drifted lazily in their assigned orbit. Their hulls gleamed with the smooth, polished steel of a dominant force that had never truly been challenged. They had no reason to suspect that an unremarkable freighter was in fact carrying the wrath of an entire fallen species. A crackle came through the comms. A board soundings officer spoke in accented galactic common. Unidentified human freighter. Transmit cargo manifest and state your purpose. Delara tapped at her console, sending the falsified documents they had prepared. The Wayfarer's Luck was officially a salvager ship registered under a fake identity. The manifest showed it was carrying outdated mining equipment, stripped-down ship parts, and scrap metals. Nothing of interest to an Imperial patrol. A pause, then another voice, sharper this time. Your hull signature does not match any registered ships. Explain. Elias took a breath, his fingers tapping against the armrest. This was the moment. If they pushed too hard, this might insist on a full scan, and the deception would be over. But if they played it just right. He leaned forward, pressing the comms button. This is Captain Joran Dells of the Wayfarer's Luck. We bought this wreck off a rim dealer, fixed her up ourselves. Eels, we don't have time to register every last hull plate. And to be honest, we didn't think you lizard bastards would care about a junk hauler like a silenced Delara shot Elias, a look, a dangerous one. A growl came through the speakers. Watch your tongue, human. Elias let out a dry chuckle, or what you'll board us for a few missing hull records. Sure, waste your time, but last I checked your empire doesn't bother with nobodies like us. Another pause. Then the officer clicked his mandibles. Proceed. Elias exhaled slowly. They had taken the bait. The Wayfarer's luck continued forward, slipping past the checkpoint and into the heart of controlled space. Now the real work began. Deep in the belly of the ship, engineer Marco Stitchkeller was hunched over a control panel, sweat dripping from his brow. The Wayfarer's luck had two faces: the decayed exterior meant to fool patrols and the hidden deadly heart of a war machine waiting to strike and right. Now that war machine was waking up. We're green across the board, Marco said, his voice tight with focus. Weapons still on standby mode, stealth systems holding. They don't know we hear. Elias nodded. Good, Leighton. Keep it that way until we reach the target. Their mission wasn't to take on some border outpost. That would be too easy, too obvious. No, their target was far bigger. In the core of this system lay a military shipyard, a sprawling fortress where the Empire constructed and refitted its warships. It was the heart of their power in this sector, a stronghold no sane fleet would dare attack. But Elias wasn't bringing a fleet, he was bringing a ghost, a single warship, disguised as a relic, and he was about to remind us that humanity had never truly been defeated. Hours later, the shipyard loomed in the distance, a massive construct of steel and fire. Gargantuan docking rings housed dozens of warships, their sleek predatory forms resting in place like sleeping beasts. Workers and drones swarmed the structure, reinforcing hulls, refitting weapons, expanding the Empire's reach. It was a symbol of their power, and Elias was going to turn it into their grave. Everyone to battle stations, he said, his voice calm but firm. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, no shouts, no panic, just grim determination. They had been waiting for this moment for too long. Elias pressed a switch on his console. The Wayfarer luck died. Every external system went dark. No engines, no lights, just drifting silence, as if the old freighter had finally given up to any scanners watching. It was just another derelict, another piece of floating scrap, nothing to investigate. Perfect in the dark. Elias grinned. Wake the beast. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. The Wayfarer's luck, or rather the retribution, drifted lifelessly toward the heart of this shipyard. Just another dead freighter lost in the void inside. However, the war machine was waking up. Marco Keller worked fast, his fingers flying across the controls as he bypassed every system that had been locked down for stealth. Beneath the ship's aged and corroded plating, layers of reinforced armor hummed with power. Weapons long hidden beneath false hull plates came online and silenced their targeting systems, feeding data into the ship's primitive-looking, yet impossibly advanced command core. We're hot, Marco said, all weapons standing by. Durara was watching the shipyard's movements on her sensors. No sign of suspicion. They think we're dead. Elias Vance allowed himself a small, humorless smile that was about to change. Stitch drop the cloak and fire up the fangs. With a single keystroke, the retribution came to life. Power surged through the ship systems, booting from silent standby to full combat mode in an instant. Stealth plating peeled back as hidden compartments unfolded, revealing missile launchers, plasma cannons, and rail guns that had been welded seamlessly into the once rusted frame. And the fangs. Oh, the fangs, two experimental rail turrets designed to fire depleted tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds, hidden within the ship's spine. Weapons so powerful they had been outlawed by the old Earth Council before the war even began. Elias had stolen them before this could, and now he was about to introduce the Empire to their fury. On this shipyard's control deck, Commander Viscar stood overlooking the massive warships docked beneath him, his clawed hands resting lightly on the railing. Another day of maintaining the Empire's supremacy, another day overseeing the endless construction of the fleet that would crush whatever resistance still lingered in the shadows. He turned to his subordinate, a younger officer who had just finished scanning the sector. Reports the human freighter, Viscar asked, lazily drifting. The officer responded, no power, no life signs, likely a derelict. Viscar clicked his mandibles in amusement. Pathetic, even their ships know when to die. He turned back to his observation deck below the largest of their fleet. An Imperial Dren was in the final stages of refit. Soon it would join the Armada, another unstoppable force to bring fear to the remaining colonies of humankind. Though that was when the alarms Blared all stations, unidentified vessel powering up massive energy, spike detected Viscar. Whirled just in time to see the Wayfarer's luck transform before it. His ice panels peeled away, revealing weapon arrays that no freighter should have had. The rusted broken hull suddenly gleamed with a dull, ominous glow as power surged through its hidden systems. And then the Retribution opened fire. The first shot from the Fangs tore through the shipyard's primary shield generator, punching a hole clean through its structure. Before anyone had time to react, the second shot followed a millisecond later, slamming into the command tower of a half-finished battle cruiser, turning metal and flesh into a mist of debris. Panic erupted as station defenses struggled to respond, but they were too slow. The Retribution wasn't some human rebellion frigate or scavenged colony warship. It was a ghost designed for one purpose: to hit so hard the enemy never had a chance to hit back. Railguns and missile turrets screamed to life, unleashing devastation into the shipyard's infrastructure. Fighters scrambled to launch, but automated flak batteries shredded them before they could clear the hangars. Explosions bloomed in the void as fuel lines ruptured, sending shockwaves through the entire facility. And still the Retribution pressed forward. Elias stood at the helm, his voice calm as he issued commands. Delara, focus fire on the dreadnoughts. Thrusters, I want that thing crippled before it can get online. The ship vibrated as the main plasma cannons fired, slamming into the dreadnought's exposed engines. The massive warship buckled, struggling to maintain stability as its power grid overloaded. On this command deck, Viscar watched in horror as his shipyard, the pride of the Empire, was reduced to a burning wreck. This isn't possible, he growled. That's just a human freighter. Then as the Retribution turned toward the final control tower, he saw it. The ship's hull had shed its disguise, and underneath, painted in blackened steel, was its true name: Retribution. Viscar blood ran cold. This wasn't a freighter, this was vengeance. And it was already too late. This shipyard was burning. Fires raged along the station's superstructure, consuming exposed fuel lines and storage depots. Explosions rippled through the docking bays as the Retribution's weapons tore through support beams, severing entire sections of the facility. The once proud symbol of the Empire's dominance had become a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered warships. On the bridge of the Retribution, Elias Vance watched with cold satisfaction. Status, he asked. Delara's voice was crisp. Focused. Outer defenses are gone. No reinforcements detected yet, but long-range comms are down. We need to assume they've already sent a distress call. They'll come in force, Marco muttered, sweat dripping from his forehead as he monitored the reactor output. This isn't some border patrol we just punched the Empire in the throat. Elias nodded. Good, then let's make sure they choke on it. He turned his attention to the dreadnought, the crown jewel of the shipyard, now crippled and floundering in the chaos. Smoke billowed from its thruster array, and emergency crews scrambled along its hull, desperate to repair the damage. Before the Retribution finished the job, they'll try to salvage that thing, Elias murmured. Not on my watch. Targeting its core, Delara asked. Elias shook his head. Number we taking it with us? Marco nearly dropped his tablet. Wait, what? Elias grinned. They built that ship to be the spear of their next invasion. It's fully armed, nearly finished, and already got half a crew on board. They just don't know who they're working for yet. Delara eyes lit up as she caught on. We boarded exactly, Elias said. We take their own monster and turn it against them. The crew exchanged glances. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was perfect prep. The boarding team, Elias ordered, we hit them hard, fast, and leave nothing but corpses on the command deck of the dread. Vasis Commander Viscar was losing what little composure he had left. This is impossible, he hissed, gripping the console with clawed fingers. His officers scrambled around him, trying to reroute power and reestablish control. One human ship, one human has done all this. His second in command, a younger officer named Kick, clicked his mandibles nervously. Sir, their weapons are too advanced to be a standard freighter. This was planned. Viscar spun on him, fury flashing in his reptilian eyes. And you let it slip through our defenses. Cask didn't dare respond. Viscar slammed a fist against the console. Seal the bridge, ready all remaining troops. We will not let these vermin take our ship. Then the alarms blared again. Commander, a technician shrieked. "We've got incoming boarders, human signatures." Viscar blood turned to ice. They weren't just attacking, they were coming for his ship. Inside the Retribution, the boarding team gathered at the airlock. They were a grim, battle-hardened crew, former soldiers, mercenaries, and outlaws who had survived the fall of humanity's homeworld and spent years fighting in the shadows. Now they were about to take the fight straight into the Empire's heart. Elias stood at the front, his rifle slung across his chest, his eyes locked onto the countdown timer. "Once we're in, we push straight for the bridge," he said. "No mercy, no hesitation. We take this ship or we die." Trying, a low hum filled the chamber as the airlock sequence began. The Retribution latched onto the dreadnought's hull. Metal groaned, the doors slid open, and Elias led his crew straight into hell. The boarding hatch hissed as it fully disengaged, and the moment the seal was broken, Elias Vance led his crew into this dread with all the fury of a species that had refused to die. The first wave of defenders barely had time to react. They had expected a ragged band of human scavengers, desperate and uncoordinated. What they got was a precision strike team that moved with deadly efficiency. Elias fired first. His rifle kicked against his shoulder, sending a rail slug straight through the first Zal's head. The alien's elongated skull snapped backward, purple blood spraying the corridor walls behind him. Delura picked off another with a plasma bolt to the throat. Marco and the rest of the boarding crew surged forward, laying down a withering hail of gunfire that tore through the ill-prepared defenders. This panic, some tried to hold their ground, firing wildly down the hallway. But they were too slow, too soft. The Empire had grown complacent, believing itself untouchable now. It was bleeding. Elias pressed forward, his boots crunching over bodies as he checked their advance. "Keep moving." We pushed straight to the bridge. The dread was massive, its interior a maze of sleek metallic corridors, illuminated by the cold glow of overhead lights. Security bulkheads began to slam shut, this desperately trying to contain them. But Durara was already on it. She plugged a data spike into a nearby terminal, fingers flying across the control pad. "Give me 10 seconds, she muttered. "You've got 5. Elias turned, raising his rifle just in time to gun down an officer who had thought he could be a hero. The alien slumped against the wall, his sidearm clattering to the floor. The doors hissed open. "Go." They poured into the next corridor, cutting down the resistance. As they advanced toward the dreadnought's heart, the closer they got, the more desperate. This became defense turrets activated, forcing Elias's crew into cover. Grenades were lobbed down hallways, sending shock waves of fire and debris through the enclosed space. Marco took a shot to the shoulder, grunting as he staggered back. One of the medics pulled him to cover, patching him up with a quick shot of coagulant. "I'm good," Marco gritted out, just pissed off now. Elias gave him a grim smile. "Then let's finish this." They pressed on, fighting through waves of forces. By now the entire ship had to know they were here, but it didn't matter. They weren't here for stealth anymore. They were here to take the ship. And then they reached the final doors, the bridge of the vases. Elias took a deep breath. His team spread out, weapons ready inside. Commander Viscar and his officers were waiting. "Breach it," Elias ordered. Marco stepped forward, planting a shake charge against the door's locking mechanism. The timer ticked down. 3, 2, 1. The explosion rocked the corridor, and before the smoke had even cleared, Elias charged in. The final battle for the ship had begun. The blast door ruptured inward with a deafening roar, sending shards of metal flying through the bridge of the vases. Smoke billowed through the entrance as Elias Vance led his team into the control center of this dreadnought. Weapons raised, hearts pounding. For a fraction of a second, the room stood frozen in time. The officers, their clawed hands hovering over control panels, turned in shock. Commander Viscar, his reptilian face twisted in fury, stood at the command desk, his mandibles clicking. In rage, the glow of emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the bridge, illuminating the bodies of fallen guards who had tried and failed to hold the humans back. Then chaos erupted. Viscar roar shattered the moment. "Kill them." The bridge exploded into gunfire. Elias dropped to one knee, firing 2 quick shots that tore through his technician's chest. Beside him, Durara ducked behind a console, her plasma pistol sending bolts of searing energy into the enemy ranks. Marco, despite his injured shoulder, took down a gunner with a well-placed rail slug to the head. The bridge was a kill zone. Sparks rained from shattered control panels, and the acrid stench of burning flesh filled the air. The Sith were fierce, but Elias and his crew were faster, more precise, more desperate. Elias spotted Viscar near the command console barking orders as he tried to activate the Dreadnought's emergency defenses. No doubt the commander was hoping to override the ship's systems, maybe even trigger a self-destruct to deny humanity their prize. Not today. Elias vaulted over a railing, landing hard and rolling behind a nearby console as a barrage of plasma fire scorched the metal where he had stood. He popped up and fired his shot, tearing through the throat of Viscar. Second in command, the officer collapsed, gurgling on his own blood. Viscar whirled, eyes burning with hatred. "You dare!" the commander snarled, reaching for his own weapon. Elias didn't give him the chance. He surged forward, slamming his rifle across Viscar's jaw with bone-crunching force. The alien staggered, man snapping in pain. Elias didn't let up. He drove his fist into the Zal's gut, then grabbed the commander's arm and twisted, forcing him to drop his weapon. Viscar was strong, stronger than any human, but IAS fought with the fury of a species that had nothing left to lose. The commander lashed out, claws raking across Elias's side, drawing blood. Elias gritted his teeth through the pain, using the momentum to drive his knee into Viscar's chest. The alien stumbled back, and Elias raised his pistol, leveling it between the commander's glowing yellow eyes. The bridge had gone silent. The remaining officer ERS had either been killed or were cowering behind consoles, weapons discarded. Durara and the others held their guns steady, breathing hard, but victorious. Elias didn't blink. "Get away from the console," he ordered. Viscar bared his teeth, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you've won, human?" Elias didn't respond. He simply fired. The rail slug punched straight through Viscar's skull, snapping his head back in a spray of dark purple blood. His body slumped to the floor, lifeless. Elias exhaled, lowering his weapon. "Bridge secured," Delora confirmed, her voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Elias stepped over Viscar's corpse, taking his place at the command console. The screens flickered with the ship's status, engines damage, but operation weapons at 80% shields, regenerating. The Vacus was still alive, and now it belonged to them. He turned to his crew. "Get the systems online patch into the Retribution. Tell them we have a new ride." Marco let out a breathless laugh. "We just stole this Drain." Elias grinned, blood still dripping from his side. "No," he corrected. "We just took the first pie piece of their empire." The bridge of the Vacas pulsed with the dim glow of emergency lights, the air thick with the scent of burning circuits and blood. The silence that followed the battle was deafening, broken only by the crackle of sparking consoles and the heavy breathing of Elias's crew. Durara was already at the control panel, her fingers flying over the interface linking us to the Retribution. Now a pause, then a small smirk. "They're a little shocked," Elias chuckled, wiping blood from his brow. "Can't blame them. This wasn't exactly in the mission plan." Marco, still cradling his wounded shoulder, let out a dry laugh. "Oh, you mean we weren't supposed to hijack the most advanced warship in this sector with a single crew and a bucket of explosives? Could have fooled me." Elias ignored the sarcasm. His mind was already on the next step. Taking the Vases had been the impossible part, but keeping it, that was another challenge entirely. "They'll be coming," Delara warned. "We sent up every red flag in the system. We need to move." Elias nodded. "How bad's the damage?" Marco pulled up the diagnostics, his brow furrowing. "Engines took a hit during our assault. We've got power, but we're slow. Weapons are at 80%, but the main plasma batteries need recalibration. Shields are recharging, but we won't last in a sustained fight." Elias exhaled, enough to punch our way out. Marco gave a lopsided grin. "Oh, absolutely." Elias turned to the few surviving crew members. They were huddled near the back of the bridge, their weapons confiscated, fear evident in their reptilian eyes. They had never expected humans to reach this far, let alone take one of their prized warships. He walked towards them, crouching down to their level. "I'm giving you a choice," he said calmly. "You work with us, or you go out the airlock, one of them, a younger officer hissed. In defiance, you cannot hope to win against the Empire. This ship will not save your dying race. Elias smiled coldly. We'll see. Without another word, he stood and turned back to his crew. Marco, fire up the engines. Delara, get us a nav. Route out of this system. Delara hesitated. Where are we going? Elias walked up to the command chair, the throne of a warship that had once belonged to his enemy, and sat down. He leaned back, exhaling, as he felt the hum of stolen power beneath him. We just took their prize ship, he said. Leighton, make sure they know exactly who did it. He turned to Delara and grinned. We're going straight for the heart of the Empire. The Vacus rumbled beneath them as its massive engines roared to life outside. The wreckage of this shipyard floated in the void, a silent testament to the disaster Elias and his crew had just unleashed upon the Empire. Fires still raged along the shattered hulls of half-built warships, and the station itself had been reduced to a crumbling ruin. But Elias wasn't looking at the wreckage. His gaze was fixed on the holographic star map hovering above the command console, its flickering red markers indicating the movement of enemy reinforcements. They're coming. Delara murmured. At least 3 warships inbound plus fighter squadrons. Estimated arrival time less than 10 minutes. Elias cracked his knuckles. Good. Leighton not be here when they arrive. Marco was already working at the engineering station, sweat dripping from his brow as he pushed the damaged systems beyond their limits. Engines are still sluggish, but we've got enough juice to make a jump. Delara hesitated, her fingers hovering over the nav controls. Where are we jumping to? We barely have any safe zones left, and every major human colony that's still standing is deep in hiding. Elias leaned forward, staring at the map. We don't need a safe zone, he pointed to a system deep within space, a location the Empire had never expected to see marked on a human battle plan. Delara's eyes widened. You're insane. Marco glanced up, squinting at the coordinates. That's wait, are you serious? Elias smirked. Dead serious, Delara swore under her breath. That's the largest military hub in the entire sector. Every fleet reinforcement they'd got is stationed there. Exactly, Elias said. A stunned silence followed. Finally, Marco let out a low whistle. We just stole one of their biggest warships, and now you want to fly it straight into their capital defense grid. Elias grinned. We didn't steal a warship just to run and hide. We're sending a message. Delara exhaled sharply. You want to scare them. I want to humiliate them. Elias corrected. They think we're dead. They think humanity is broken, but we just took one of their dreadnoughts right out from under their noses, and now we're going to shove it down their throats. Marco laughed, shaking his head. You really are a madman. Elias turned to Delara. Plot the course. She hesitated for only a second before nodding. Course locked. In the ship shuddered as the FTL drive powered up, the hum of its core resonating through the deck. The stars outside began to distort as space itself warped around them. Then, in a flash of energy, the Vacus disappeared from the burning remains of the shipyard, leaving nothing but wreckage. Panic and the terrifying realization that the war humanity had lost had just begun again. The stars blurred and stretched as the Vacus hurtled through FTL space, cutting through the void toward the heart of this empire. The stolen Dragon rumbled under Elias's feet, the once proud war machine now carrying the ghosts of its former masters. Elias sat in the command chair, watching as the status readouts flickered with warning lights. The ship was still damaged, the shields were low, the reactor was running at unstable levels, and yet here they were barreling toward the most fortified system in the Empire. It was insanity, it was suicide. And it was exactly what this would never expect. Delara was pacing beside the nav console, her expression tight with frustration. I can't believe I let you talk me into this. Elias smirked. You love it. I hate it, she snapped. And I hate that you're right. Marco leaned against the engineering station, wincing slightly as he adjusted his injured shoulder. So, what's the actual plan here, Captain? Because I don't think knocking on their front door and yelling boo is going to cut it. Elias's grin widened. That's exactly what we're going to do. Marco blinked. Oh great, that's comforting. Delara shook her head, crossing her arms. Elaborate. Elias leaned forward, activating the central display, a hologram of their destination, Villar Prime, the nerve center of this war machine, flickered into view. The planet was surrounded by orbital defense platformed shipyards, and the large concentration of fleet forces in the sector, no human vessel had ever made it past the outer perimeter. Elias intended to take the vases straight through the front gates. We come out of FTL, right at the edge of their primary defense zone. He explained they won't open fire immediately, not on one of their own ships. They'll be confused, scrambling for answers. Delara nodded, slowly catching on. They'll think we're wounded, maybe survives from the shipyard attack. Exactly. Elias said that buys us a window. We let them hail us, pretend we're a crippled warship requesting emergency docking. Marco frowned. And then what? The moment they scan us, they'll know we're human. Elias's smirk turned into something colder. They won't get the chance to scan us. He tapped the console, bringing up the VAS's full weapons array. The rail cannons, plasma batteries, and missile launchers flickered to life on the display. We go in like we belong, Elias said, and the second we close enough, we hit them with everything the ship's got. Delara let out a slow breath. We're going to their entire command structure. We're going to gut them, Elias corrected. Take out their comms relays, their shipyard, their leadership, leave them in chaos. Marco let out a short laugh. Dan, you're really aiming to make the Empire bleed. Elias's expression hardened. They made humanity bleed first. The ship's console beeped. FTL exit. In 60 seconds, the bridge went silent. Delara checked her weapons. Marco tightened the straps on his gear. The remaining crew members exchanged glances, some nervous, some eager. Elias stood from the command chair, rolling his shoulders. Listen up, he said, his voice steady. We're about to do something no human has ever done. We're not just fighting back, we're showing the Empire that we're still here, that we're dangerous, that we don't die just because they think we should. He glanced at Delara and Marco. No matter what happens next, he continued, they'll never forget this day. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of FTL. Before them, Velker Prime loomed in the darkness, a jewel of war and industry around it. The Empire's war machines stood in formation, battle cruisers, dreadnoughts, planetary defense stations, the heart of the beast, and into the mouth of the dragon a stolen warship approached. The comms crackled to life. Velkas, you are entering a restricted zone. Identify immediately. Elias leaned forward, his grin sharp as a knife. Litten, give them something to remember. And then, with a single command, the stolen dream fired. The Velkas roared as its weapon systems came online, the stolen dream shedding its disguise in a single explosive moment of betrayal. The first shot came from the rail cannons, a pair of tungsten slugs fired at near light speeds. The slugs tore through the nearest orbital defense platform before anyone on Velker Prime could react, shattering it into a cloud of burning wreckage. The second shot followed a heartbeat later, obliterating a communications relay before it could send out an emergency alert. Then all hell broke loose. This fleet hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Elias and his crew to unleash the full fury of the Velkas plasma batteries, lit up the void, hammering into the unprepared defense forces. Missile pods fired in rapid succession, their payloads screaming toward fuel depots, command stations, and capital ships still scrambling to raise their shields on the bridge. Elias stood firm, gripping the rail as the vases charged forward into the chaos status. He barked. Lara's fingers flew over her console. Direct hits across their main defense grid. We've crippled half their early warning systems, but they're mobilizing fast fighters and warships inbound. Marco let out a dark chuckle. They don't even know who's shooting at them. Yet the comms crackled again, but this time the voice on the other end was no longer issuing orders, it was panicking. Velkas, cease fire. You are attacking friendly targets. Identify immediately. Elias smirked. Oh, you want identification? He pressed a button on his console. The external plating of the vase began to shift, shedding the last remnants of its former allegiance burned into its hull. Carved deep into the metal were three simple words: retribution is here. The comms exploded into panicked screams. Elias turned to Delara. Keep up the fire. Hit their leadership centers next. I want their admirals dead before they even understand what's happening. The Velkas